Okay, we're going to start tonight's meeting with a special award of recognition, and I'm going to turn the microphone over to my colleague, Mr. Liverman.
Thank you so much. It's always an honor to have the privilege to recognize some of our fine citizens here in Princeton, New Jersey. When I was a young lad growing up in Princeton, I used to watch my favorite hero on television. No, it was not Batman and Robin. No, it was not Aquaman. No, it was not Spider-Man. And no, it wasn't Inspector Gadget. It was Superman. You see, Superman could do everything that every other superhero could do. I loved Superman. I'm here tonight, to recognize a gentleman in our community that has proven over time that he has the same qualities of Superman. We are here to recognize Mr. Leighton Nolan for his love that he has exhibited for this great town of Princeton. I just want to do a brief background of this giant of a man. Leighton was born here in Princeton, New Jersey, and attended the Princeton school system. Leighton then went on to attend Lincoln University and received a BA degree in English. This is why his letters to us are so succinct and to the point. Upon graduation, Leighton worked for New England Life Insurance Company as a pension analyst. He later moved over to IBM as an administrator specializing in transportation and logistics. Leighton then actually went on to work in sales for Bristol Myers Squibb, was Bristol Myers from 1977 to 81. Leighton, having a small business bug, opened 2 retail stores named From the Neck Up in the Beacon Hill and Cambridge, Massachusetts section. In 1990, he closed both of those locations and went to work for Reebok Footwear. He opened and managed the concept stores in Santa Monica, California, and New York City. Do you see why I'm calling this man Superman? In 1996, he moved back to Princeton to help his aging parent. I can continue through the entire council meeting talking about Leighton's career, but I want to move forward. Leighton is currently employed by the GEO Group, Tolley House, in Newark, New Jersey. Leighton was hired in 1998 as a director of special services. Over the past 20 years, Leighton has assisted residents in the prison reentry and reintegration process, focusing primarily on education and vocational training initiatives. This type of caring and offering help to others is what has fostered the compassion Leighton has shown to the town of Princeton. When Princeton had the last major tax revaluation and members of the John Witherspoon neighborhood would see taxes increase, Leighton, along with many friends, addressed the issue and sought relief from asking Princeton University to contribute to those among us that were struggling to pay taxes. There was a deal agreed upon, and the residents that struggle do now receive financial help. For years, the Honorable Jim Floyd will lead community meetings to discuss all issues concerning the John Witherspoon neighborhood. Leighton has since, with the help of the Honorable Yana Moore, Ms. Shirley Satterfield, and Bernie Hines, have continued these once-a-month meetings and have provided a time and place that some of our community members can speak out and try to get answers on many community questions. Leighton has been an ear to the community so many times, helping to make our job up here much easier. I want to say that I've learned over time to respect Leighton and his compassion to make sure that everyone starts off on the same playing field. All the time and energy that Leighton puts into making Princeton a great town is truly appreciated. In 1997, Mayor Michelle Tuck Ponder asked Leighton Nolan to join the board of Princeton Housing Authority. Listen to this. Leighton is currently in his 3rd 5-year term and has been chairman of the board since 2003. The dedication and love that Leighton has given, I hope we all appreciate. Thank you, Leighton, for your service. You can please come forward. Testing. Leighton, we're going to present this to you. It's a certificate of appreciation for Leighton Nolan. of the Mayor and Council recognizes Leighton Nolan for his outstanding contributions to the Princeton community, awarded September 24th, 2018, signed for by one of the best mayors in the world, Liz Lampert, Mayor of Princeton.
I agree. Thank you, Mayor, Lance, members of council, members of the table here, Dolores, for this wonderful acknowledgement and honor. I greatly, greatly appreciate it. And thank you for the work that you do. Thanks.
Thanks, Lance. Congratulations, Leighton. Thank you from all of us for all you do. Next, we have announcements, and I'll start on my right with Mr. Cohen.
I just want to mention there's an event I'm planning with Kim Dorman from the library. It's outreach to neighborhood associations throughout town to work on kicking off a sort of a buddy system for neighbors who have special needs or elderly, or basically as part of my duties as liaison to the local emergency planning committee. So it's going to be Saturday morning from 9 to about 11, and I encourage people to come out and hear about the program.
One announcement, Mayor. As you know, but members of the public might not be aware, the mayor's bike ride was postponed yesterday. We respect the trails in Community Park, and they were muddy, and we didn't want to tear them up. So we do have a new date. It is October 7th, Sunday, 11 a.m. We'll leave from Community Park South. So see you then.
I just have a couple announcements. The first, there's already been some news about this, but New Jersey Transit has announced that they're putting in positive train controls on several of their lines, including the Dinky, and they've announced that the Dinky is not going to be running between October 14th and January. We are, I know I am, probably speak for almost everybody up here, are concerned about the length of that closure. I've reached out to Tom Clark at New Jersey Transit and have invited a representative from New Jersey Transit to come to our next council meeting, which is going to be on October 8th, I believe, that Monday night. So we're hoping they're going to send somebody here to help answer some of the questions we all have about the length of that closure, and also hopefully give us some assurances about substitute buses. I've also been in contact with Princeton University. I know they're concerned also, and hopefully we can work together both locally and with New Jersey Transit. Other announcements: this Friday, the 28th, between 8:30 and 10 a.m., I'll be in the lobby of the Princeton Public Library for my monthly Meet the Mayor open office hours. And that was it for my announcements. Are there any staff announcements? Nope. Ms. Stockton?
New Jersey Department of Transportation will be hosting a public information center tomorrow in the community room from, I'm trying to look up the time, I think it's 4:30 to 6:30 tomorrow, and it is in regards to their upcoming project on US Route 206 between Ayrton Road and Hillside Avenue, where a culvert under the roadway will be replaced. The highway will be closed for about a 1-week period while this work is taking place, and will be detours that will be established. All of the information is on our municipal website, but anybody that's interested, please come out to the information center tomorrow, and they will have more information. You'll be able to speak directly with the Department of Transportation staff about the project.
Great, thank you.
And the work is anticipated to start at the end of October, but the road will be open before the half marathon.
Okay, great. Any other staff reports? Nope. Or announcements, sorry. All right, then we come to comments from the public for items that are not already on the agenda, and we'll start with the sign-up sheet that was on the podium, and then we'll open it up to anybody else who'd like to speak. So first is John Kilbride.
Yes, there we go. My name is John Kilbert. I'm a retired railroader and currently serve as treasurer for the Save the Dinky group and as the local liaison to the New Jersey Association of Railroad Passengers. As you know, and have just announced, as reported in the Planet Princeton last week and now in other news medias, NJ Transit has plans to suspend service on the Dinky line for 3 months beginning in mid-October in order to install positive train control technology. I'm not here to question the need or efficacy of positive train control. However, I must question the need to shut down service on the Dinky for the 3 months to put this system in service. The hardware required does not involve extensive work on the tracks. The line is very short, and it's not obvious as to why this can't be done at night or in the daylight in a week or so, as other line upgrades have been done. Other regional commuter rail operators have already installed PTC without curtailing their line operations. This community deserves an explanation. Many commuters in and out of Princeton rely on the Dinky, and it will be seriously inconvenienced by the 3-month hiatus. In addition, the hiatus poses a serious threat to the long-term visibility of our Dinky line. Ridership has decreased significantly since 2013 when the line was last truncated. Ridership will never be decreased further with a 3-month stoppage during the peak travel section coming up. What can this council do? At a minimum, you should send a letter to New Jersey Transit with a copy to the governor, assemblymen, state senators, and the chairs of the Senate and Assembly Transportation Committees to ask for an explanation as to why a 3-month stoppage is necessary for work that does not involve extensive work on the tracks. The transit can reconsider its work plan to minimize the stoppage to a matter of weeks, not months, and or shorter nighttime or weekend outages. And thirdly, that the NJ Transit reassure the council and riders who rely on the Dinky that the 3-month stoppage does not preclude to abandonment of the Dinky service altogether, as some fear it might be. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Is there anybody else who'd like to speak as part of public comment?
Matt Bodegheimer, White Pine Lane, Princeton. Just wanted to repeat appreciation that you've probably heard in the past for the experimentation that the city did with beta bike lanes on Hamilton and Paul Robeson and Wiggins earlier this year. Just wanted to say that at our last meeting, the Princeton Progressive Group talked a lot about that and about hoping that there would be more opportunities in the coming year for similar kind of experimentation, and we really would like to see Witherspoon between Paul Robeson and Nassau Street closed off for some weekend, and Palmer Square is again in a similar kind of experimental vein. So we want to applaud the efforts you're taking to test things out. I also wanted to say that the letter that was written in Town Topics questioning policy on the use it or lose it parking policy, I just wanted to say that that's something that I've been aware of for the past couple of years. I just wanted to say that I don't think there's any reason that the council should be playing defense about that. And it's great that you're thinking about transferring policy, balances to new cards if that's possible. But really, there's been ample notice of the ending of this program. And then the last thing, I guess, I would just any disruption to dinky service is going to be difficult for the community to digest. I can imagine reasons why New Jersey Transit would do it. Just because we can't think of them doesn't mean that there aren't reasons. But I think, and it's still important to be thinking about what the next generation of mobility back and forth between Princeton and Route 1 is going to be. And, it's not too early to begin thinking about the next phases, especially in light of the campus planning work that's being done. We need to think about what that next generation is going to be. I know we've been given some thought to it, but, it's still something that's relevant, and I don't think we know what that next generation is. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
I'm Kip Cherry, 24 Dempsey. I want to second the motion as to what Nat and John Kilbride have just said. I think that we sort of take the dinky for granted and we don't realize what a tremendous asset it is and what it contributes to our community. Our ridership level right now for 2017 was 482,000 riders back and forth on the dinky. And right now, about 40,000 per month take the dinky. Those are a lot of folks to put on the road or even in buses. And of course, the buses don't ride as fast as the train, so you have your schedule completely screwed up by taking the bus. So I think Jenny knows better than anybody about what it does to get on a bus. So congestion is a big problem that we have, and the dinky has been a tremendous valued partner in getting people off the road. And we need to move more people onto the dinky, and we've been starting to do that with the Go Princeton campaign to get people on mass transit and taking bicycles and walking. I think that this is really a lousy time for some kind of a break. This is the time in which we have the most riders. October and May are the 2 months of the year in which there are more riders than any other time. So this is the worst time they could choose. And I think we all have a tremendous question as to whether or not 3 months are really required for this positive motion control, or even, quite frankly, and I'm a novice, but I'm still questioning whether or not we need positive motion control on the dinky. It's just one track, it doesn't go very fast. It's certainly not a high priority. And so I would hope that New Jersey Transit would come up with a different solution for this, and I think we should press them hard, and I think I'm concerned about waiting 2 weeks, because October 14th is around the corner. So I would hope that we could step it up and actually have communication starting earlier. I think it's great that they come here and speak to us, but I would hope that you all would press a little earlier to get something going with the New Jersey Transit and begin to communicate with Kevin Corbett, the director. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Doug Rubin. I live on Laurel Road. Thank you, Council, Mayor, and Chief Engineer, or Municipal Engineer, Stockton. I want to just thank you and congratulate you for the in-depth work you've done around the parking in Princeton. As a resident who kind of knows my way around, I've never had a problem finding a parking spot. Sometimes it's not always that convenient. I have a background in transportation. I worked for ALK Technologies, Certificate of Transportation undergraduate, worked as a transportation economist for a port company. And parking spots in the center of town, just like any real estate, are dear. And I want to just congratulate you for realizing that the dynamic pricing is a way to fairly allocate the need for parking with the availability. And I hope you move forward on this. And yeah, I have some old parking cards. We'll use them up. It's not the end of the world. I like living in this town. I like finding parking. But when I get a perfect parking spot, I'm willing to pay for it. And otherwise, I have to walk or bike or something like that. So thank you very much for all your efforts.
Thank you.
What a great comment.
Yeah. Anybody else who'd like to speak as part of public comment? All right, I just want to follow up on the recommendations for reaching out to New Jersey Transit.
I think I share the concerns of the people, and Mr. Kilbride, I said it very well. And I think I'd like to draft a resolution, if it's okay with the council, with the Public Transit Committee perhaps, regarding this subject. And I did want to talk about positive train control because I learned a little bit about it over the weekend, because actually my husband is an expert in it. And, there's no way around it. I mean, the dinky does need it, even though it's a short track. For one thing, it's the federal legislation.
It's a requirement.
It's just required, but it's also, it protects the intersection and the two ends. It's just like the automatic things in cars that have improved. It stops the train if the conductor fails to do so. So no matter what, we still need it. But we're going to do what we can.
Ms. Craig?
I just hit, maybe it's a question for clarification, because reading the article about the suspension of service, my understanding was that it was partly being done to save money to pay for the positive train controls on other New Jersey Transit tracks, not just to install positive control on the dinky track. And so I just wanted to make clear, unless I misread the article, does anybody else?
Well, I think that's a question that we should ask, because that should be justified to us, right? I mean, our residents are losing out on service. So.
I mean, we've heard for years that the dinky isn't a moneymaker, so it saves them money to stop the service for a while. I still think they should be running it, but I
Agree.
absolutely will support whatever resolution gets put together, but I just wanted to clarify what the facts of the situation are, is that I think it's more of a money-saving step by New Jersey Transit than that they need to close the dinky track for 3 months to install the controls on the dinky track.
I agree that I also understand that to be the case. And in addition, the federal deadline for installing the new technology is at the end of the year, so I think that's why there's this crunch time. But nonetheless, I think the impact to Princeton is concerning, and I think it's important for us to communicate. So thank you for everybody who spoke on that. All right, next we come to reports, and we'll start with the July 2018 police report. I'd like to welcome up Chief Sutter.
Thank you, Mayor. I just had 2 updates I wanted to give Mayor and Council. In the last couple months, we were talking about the municipal court operations, and I said I would get back to you with some updates. I did recently read a report issued by the New Jersey Supreme Court on municipal court operations. They commissioned a study, and a committee made a variety of recommendations for municipal court operations that are now being implemented. And pertinent to our conversations here, I highlighted some of the recommendations. The first thing that the report did, it cited a new United States Supreme Court case, Bearden, in which the case says that courts may not incarcerate people due to an inability to pay a fine. So what the Supreme Court in New Jersey now is mandating is that in any case in which a judge contemplates the issuance of a warrant for a motor vehicle offense, there has to be an ability to pay hearing. And what that ability to pay hearing will do is evaluate the ability of the defendant's ability to pay the fine. And if there is an inability to pay, and that's the only reason why the fine isn't being paid, a warrant may not be issued and a license suspension may not be issued, but there may be other sanctions, or also payment plans or things to bring it to a resolution other than incarceration. The committee also severely limited the use of bench warrants for failing to pay a fine for any minor motor vehicle offense at all. So they are basically telling the municipal courts you should go and find other means to satisfy these issues other than warrants and license suspensions and they enumerate what severe or more higher motor vehicle offenses are where warrants may apply.
So what is it? What's the threshold about?
so that was my next point. So it said, no, that's fine. So it said, you read my mind. Bench warrants cannot be issued for less than $250. So that's the first line of demarcation. And then it enumerates cases that are more severe, like reckless driving or controlled and dangerous substance in a motor vehicle, things that are DWI that are a little higher where warrants may issue. And then, again, it said just for these serious motor vehicle offenses and not parking offenses at all. What it didn't 100% address is what the mechanism by which these cases will be resolved when there's a failure to appear, but it did insinuate or that the recommendations will be that things like parking summonses and minor motor vehicle offenses that people fail to either pay or fail to appear will be moved to some type of civil proceeding. So it'll be moved out. It clearly states that they're not criminal cases and should not be handled in that fashion. So there's a lot of other information in there, but this is what was pertinent and gave some context to some of the orders that our court had received over the last 3 months. And that's why it was because of this report. So that's what I have on that.
So how much of your stops or how many do you do usually? How's this going to affect the police's daily operations, do you think?
It won't affect our operations. It shouldn't really at all. What it will affect is the operations of the municipal court, I would assume, and how these cases are handled, specifically when people fail to appear or don't pay. And they have to be handled differently than they are now.
Do you think they're going to start using collection agencies?
It seemed to me from reading the report that they were somehow going to use civil judgments through the civil court.
But overall, it seems like a good thing. Does it seem like it to you, or do you feel like it's not a good thing?
Well, I really think it's a good thing, especially when it comes to what we've been talking about in here. We're definitely encountering on a regular basis minor motor vehicle warrants that are issued in other courts and our court that we have to make arrests on, that put us in these situations that we maybe don't want to be in terms of taking somebody into custody, but we have to. And they cause a hardship for many people. And so I think it's a lot of time, personnel time spent to process these things. So if the courts can handle it more through a civil fashion, I think that's probably good for everybody, and probably the taxpayers as well.
If I can just jump in, Jenny, and I'll send it around to everybody. The report is really impressive, and it's clear it's sort of a post-Ferguson report. It reads like they've taken the criticism people have of courts, of municipalities relying on revenues, and it's very thoughtful, makes thoughtful recommendations. But I agree with Chief Sutter that because, fortunately, we have been sensitive to these issues, we may be less affected, but this change on the warrant arrest is the most important, probably, from our end, because we've certainly seen in Princeton what that's led to.
Yeah, the warrants that are issued for $80 for failure to pay a parking ticket that, quite frankly, we have to process through arrest, it's just not good for anybody. So, those things being done civilly, at least from my perspective, are much better.
Yeah, I think it's good news. Also, it takes officers off the road for a ridiculous amount of time.
The processing is really extensive. It has to be processed like any other arrest, and you're talking hours for an officer to be off the road. And then I had one other update on our recruitment process. We did start that process. We're actually probably a little bit ahead of schedule. We did get almost 800 initial applications. 550 actually sat for the test, that came in and actually took the test. There were 300 people that passed that. Of that 300, this past weekend, 250 showed up for the physical fitness exam. And after that was done, we had 54 failures, which left about 196 that we have to now is the real difficult piece of meeting and screening those applicants and conducting a formal interview. So there'll be a screening interview. Then from that, we'll narrow it down to a more formal interview, a background investigation, and we hope to get all of that done by the middle of November. So there's a lot of heavy work to be done, but we're up to the task.
Ms. Hara?
So let's start with that then, Chief. I noticed in the report that it seems like things are stable. You're at 54, which is very rare that you're at full force. Nobody's injured, nobody is sick, nobody.
It's a dynamic situation, but at the
Oh, is
time of
that-
that report, we were at full.
At the
It's
time of
kinda-
that, okay, this summer. Okay, so there you go. I mean, but just a reminder to people that the new hires that we're anticipating coming in, it's because we're anticipating retirements, and this is to hold a steady state for the force. I think that's important for people to know.
Yeah, I've said this repeatedly, and I cannot be more thankful to you and Mr. DeShield as taking the proactive stance of anticipating vacancies, and when those vacancies occur, if you do not have a list or quality candidates to go to, you're talking about 18 months between the vacancy and filling, and in that 18 months, more go. So you quickly can find yourself in a situation where you're trying to fill spots. Maybe you're not doing the most thorough process because speed becomes more of an issue than being effective, which we never want to do. So we're more than happy to go through this process proactively like this. It's very, very helpful to us.
And that also helps us recruit a class that looks like the community, too. So that's great. I had one other question from the report, which is an increase in the number of false alarms. And I'm wondering if that's related to the alarm registration, and if you could just update us on how that's been on the implementation front, and if you're surprised by those numbers.
Yeah,
I think
so
you'll see it's at 20, just over 20 false alarms.
we're actually starting to make some headway there. The thing the information is starting to get out now as our officers start to respond to these false alarms and are issuing the warnings. So the 3 warnings actually for false alarms. People are getting their alarms registered. They're getting them serviced. Their compliance is really going well. There have been some summonses issued for really repetitive types of issues, and even those are being adjudicated in court by having, all we want is it registered and fixed. We want the system fixed, or the process, that there may be internal processes, especially at businesses, where the key holder changes and they don't know the code, the owner didn't give the key holder the code, and then we have to come, and it's bringing those issues to light, and businesses are now fixing that. So they're going to, I hope, we're just going to continue to see them, those false alarms drop.
Mr. Crown?
On the same page in the report, there was a really interesting statistic, a drop in the number of ordinance violations for overweight vehicles, like a 500% drop from over 70 to just over 10. And I'm curious what.
Chief, wouldn't that be the 206 issue?
Yeah, there could be
last
2
year?
things. We dedicate officers regularly to that. It's one of our more regular complaints, especially on our main roads. I can look at exactly, there could be several things for it. I really don't know, but I can get back to you and explain to you
Chief,
why
I'm
it
thinking
was
that
that
it was,
month.
remember last year there was a diversion to 206?
Sorry, it was a 206.
Because of the bridge?
Yes.
So
We-
last year there was a
Yes, sorry,
spike
you're right.
in overweight vehicles coming through.
When 206 was closed, the detour was causing overweight vehicles to use Mercer Road, and we were literally having one truck after another. We were posting officers out there almost all daylight hours at least to have these trucks stopped and cited because they were violating the overweight limit and disregarding the signs on the major highways. That's what it was.
Ms. Carmel?
So I'm happy that there are 5 more speeding tickets this year than over last year. I just want to reiterate, I think I've been talking to all the council members and how we just want you to give, do more, as much speeding enforcement as possible. I was talking to someone who lives in Pennington and I know I bring up Pennington, that's like my dream speeding town, because in Pennington, no one speeds because they're so afraid of getting a ticket. And everyone's gotten a ticket, including me in Pennington. But, and so now that we won't be doing as many warrants or whatever, I mean, I'm hoping we can do even more. I'm just, gonna.
Absolutely, yes.
Ms. Quinn?
Chief, I noticed on the report that there were 2 reported arsons in July of 2018, and
Yes.
were they structure fires? And can you take this opportunity to talk about how arson is investigated, what role the police play as
Sure.
opposed to fire and the county?
Absolutely. Yes, they were structure fires. I know one specifically, and I would have to look at the other one and know what that one was, but I'm fairly sure that was a structure as well. Both unoccupied structures. The way in which an arson is investigated, it's probably one of our more collaborative types of investigations that we conduct because of who's involved. So we, as a police department, have probably a handful, 5 or 6 trained arson investigators that go to a special school just to investigate arson from a criminal investigative standpoint. We collaborate with the fire inspector, and we collaborate with the county all together. And we'll use all of our expertise, all of the disciplines that we have in the investigation to look at a variety of things. Usually when it's suspicious in nature, sometimes we're able to determine right away that it's accidental or what the cause is. When it's suspicious, it's fairly easily determined within the onset of the investigation that it's purposeful. So once that's determined is when the county, arson investigators, fire officials' office all come in and investigate together. It's, they're complicated, but we're very well trained in it, and we're very equipped locally to handle these types of investigations, but the county is also always involved in them.
So after the investigation, if there are charges to be filed, who would charge someone?
It's normally our police department that handles those charges for a fire set in Princeton. It would come from the police department.
Okay, and those investigations of these 2 incidents are ongoing, or?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, they are.
Thank you, Chief.
You're welcome.
So my question actually relates to the recruitment process. I wanted to know whether out of the 196 applicants that passed the exam, whether you can tell if we're successful in recruiting candidates from diverse backgrounds.
To answer your question, yes. It's a very diverse list. The reason why we recruit, the reason why it's so important to do it the way that you've approved it to be done is that it gives us time to do the outreach and the proactive recruitment to get that diverse list. We have a recruitment policy, a plan, if you will, and diversity of hiring is at the top. To have a department that represents the community in terms of diversity. So it's constantly, we also track those figures through every stage of the process so that we can look at every piece of the process and see how the diversity, how we maintain diversity throughout, so that anything we have to change in future processes to increase that rate we can do. But I'm very happy at this point on the diversity that we have.
Great. And hopefully also candidates that speak other languages?
Yes.
Great. Thank you.
Chief, can you just give an update on where we are with the crossing guard situation?
Yes, we are, it's another dynamic situation, but we are, recruiting's actually been pretty good. We just put through another 5 people, new guards that we're training. So we're at a full complement right now. That changes. The problem that we have a lot, and we just had this happen the other day, for instance, any day you show up and there's 11 people that are out, and we have to come up with 11 police officers to fill those vacancies between 6:30 and 7:30 in the morning. So that's kind of where we're looking now. I think an answer is to have extra people on board that are available to fill those roles, and I'm talking to the media, trying to get the word out that we're looking for people in our community that want to serve, and it's a super important job. We're safeguarding the most precious among us, our children that are crossing streets in the morning. So we want people that want to serve and be part of that team. So we're still looking for more.
Okay, great. And we're often on the same email requests, but I know there's desire for more intersections to have
Yes.
crossing guards than there are now.
Yeah, Ms. Stockton and we often get the same ones as well. And, part of that problem is we're trying, throughout the years, we've identified the intersections where we want, that are safe, are most safe to cross, where we want our children to kind of funnel to. There are some, and we also evaluate need and traffic in those areas. And every request we get, we evaluate, and we go out and look. For instance, I recently received a request for a crossing guard at an intersection that we took away years ago because it was so unsafe even for a crossing guard, the line of sight issues. So we wanted children to cross at the adjacent intersection. So we're always looking at it and making those adjustments. But yeah, I do get a lot of requests for crossing guards.
Okay, great. Are there any other questions for the chief? All right, well, congratulations on the recruitment so far. It sounds really
Thank you.
promising.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
Thank you. Okay, the next report is a recycling report. Plastic bags and other contaminants will not be picked up, and I'm actually giving this report. So we have a real problem in this country, and then it's also here in Princeton with plastic bags in our recycling. I think we've talked about this at prior meetings. Everybody on council knows from a report that Bob Huff gave a couple meetings ago that our recycling costs are going to go up 40% with a new contract next year, and that is in part because China has closed its doors to U.S. recycling. But we're working with our hauler to see if we can clean up our own recycling, if that can help potentially bring our own costs down. One piece of that is education and just making sure that everybody knows that you can't put your recycling in a plastic bag and then put that plastic bag in your recycling bucket. Because if you do that, everything you've put in that plastic bag has become trash. And also the plastic bag, when it goes to the single stream recycling conveyor belt machine, it gets in the gears and it breaks the machine. And so it's the worst thing you can put in your recycling. So we want to get the word out, but at some point in the near future, we want to work with the hauler to not pick up recycling that has plastic bags in it. The hauler wants an assurance from council that we will have their back when we start getting angry phone calls from people who say you haven't picked up our recycling. So this is just a public conversation about it. My assumption is that everybody here would agree that if you have your recycling in plastic bags, there should be a sticker put on the plastic bag or some other sort of warning sign that says rejected because no plastic bags, something like that. And we're in conversation still with the hauler to figure out exactly how that program would go. But we just want to make sure that if we tell them to go out and do that, lines start lighting up at Access Princeton, that we're not going to then second guess that approach. What's that?
We're not going to cave.
Exactly.
I'm super supportive of this, and I know the Public Works Committee was supportive of this.
Okay.
Now, is this plastic, all plastic? Like plastic bags in the regular green, yellow, and the food compost recycling?
Correct. So the only plastic you should be putting in your recycling buckets are the ones that are labeled 1 and 2. If you have plastic bags that you want to recycle, you can actually bring them to McCaffrey's or bring them and put them in, there's a special rectangular plastic bag recycling bucket down the hall. I don't know, I think there's maybe 5 locations throughout town, and you can find that. I think Sustainable Princeton has that on their website where they are. But you can't put plastic bags in the recycling buckets, and you can't put them in your compost bucket either without causing major grief for the town.
I certainly would support this. We've talked about it in Public Works. I'd like to ask the county to come up with an enhanced education mechanism. I know that they put out a nice, well-designed flyer about this, but it seems that there's more that can be done to reinforce what does and doesn't go, including such practices as I was unaware that you should no longer crush cans or bottles, that sort of gums up the works, and that's exactly. So that's a sort of 70s, 80s mentality where everyone would crush everything, and that's it's not best practice currently. So if we could write to the county and ask for them to, maybe we could bring a couple ideas for how to get this word across. Not everyone's going to look at a flyer that arrives in the mail. So,
Okay.
Thank you.
The other thing we were considering was a robocall to everybody, just letting people know that enforcement is starting and to keep plastic bags out of the bucket, just to make sure that there's fewest people as possible who say, I didn't know. Why didn't you pick up my recycling? Okay. So everybody here has been warned. I know no one's putting plastic bags in the recycling, but just in case. All right, so we'll continue on with council reports, and I'll start with Mr. Cohen.
I don't have any reports tonight.
I had 2. Well, one is actually a question for Mark, that it was reported in the last week that the state Health Benefits Commission struck a deal that's going to lower retiree health costs. And, I'm involved, I'm on the State Health Benefit Review Commission, a different commission, but we've been looking at ways to save money in that program. And it was reported that it's going to save the state money and localities. And I wondered if you had looked at that and thought about what it might mean for us now.
Based on the limited information that I do have on it, it looks like in 2020 that we will receive some savings. I'm continuing to look at it to see what those types of savings that we would actually receive, but it does look like we will receive some types of savings in 2020.
Okay.
That's good news.
That is good news. The other thing I'll just mention is some of you may have seen that over the weekend, the Trump administration issued what's called the public charge rule, which is going to affect how immigration status changes are made. And it's very complicated, but what it's going to do is take into account whether an individual has been on any public health and social welfare programs and have cause a basically negative impact on immigration status for people who have been on, including Medicaid and WIC and TANF and SNAP, so the food stamps program. So there's a real fear that this is going to discourage people from using programs for which they are eligible. And I know in town we've already seen a drop in our WIC clinic in people attending because of fear. So I think we're all, Melissa Urias is aware. I mean, it came out over the weekend, and everybody's trying to figure out what we can do. There may not be a response because this is a change in federal law, but it's something we need to know. It's a reminder of that there are some levers we don't control, but this may have a very negative effect in the near term.
Is that something where the state can step in? Because aren't there concerns about public health impacts of?
There definitely are, but unfortunately, this is not an example. For many of the things, there are things the states can do to push back. But on this one, if the Department of Homeland Security has this data, and these are federal programs, they're just administered by the state. WIC is a federal program. Food stamps a federal program. So when people are enrolled in them, their data is with the federal government. So our state can't even promise people that they'll be protected. So it's really unclear what we're going to be able to do.
So I have one report, Mayor, just for the benefit of my colleagues, that I wanted to let you know that talks are continuing with Princeton Public Schools regarding a study of possible consolidation of facilities management functions between the municipality and the schools. My colleagues are aware that I've been talking about this for a while. What is also referred to as enhanced shared services. Right now, we're discussing ways to identify and hire a consultant. Both the district and the municipality have expressed a desire to split the cost of this study, and it's my understanding that Mr. DeShield and the district are deciding how to make this happen from a governance standpoint. This might include the possibility of a joint council Board of Ed subcommittee to review the proposals and possibly review recommendations. So is there anything that I missed, Mr. DeShield?
No, I believe you covered all of it, and as you indicated, we're working with the school district to come up with a committee that will coordinate the rest of the process, including consultant services and looking at the feasibility study.
Thanks. So we are moving forward, and we expect something to happen in October, correct? Thank you.
So I wanted to report on the Loteria, the Mexican Bingo Community Building event that was held yesterday in collaboration with several community partners and was hosted by the University Art Museum. And actually in the early morning, we were concerned that we were going to have a low turnout due to the rain, and we were already strategizing that we would just get people who were touring the museum to participate. But we ended up having such a great turnout that it really exceeded our expectations, I think even more than other events that we've held. The museum director, James Stewart, Mayor Lempert, and Councilman Quinn participated as celebrity callers. And I can attest that their Spanish is pretty good. And in addition to playing the bingo, the museum offered a bilingual tour of the Ancient Americas exhibit. And they also had participants go on a scavenger hunt throughout the museum. And we have received such wonderful feedback that I wanted to thank everybody that participated and assure them that we will be doing it again. The museum is has already offered to host another event.
Yeah, I want to thank you, Leticia, for helping to organize that. It was a really wonderful, wonderful event. I have a few reports. I was down in Trenton for 2 meetings over the past couple of weeks. So the first was the Economic Development Authority is putting together an economic development strategic plan for the state, and they were having several focus groups. I'm excited about what they're doing. I think their revisioning of the department is going to be more in line with an EDA that might actually be helpful to Princeton. So there's more of a focus on smaller businesses, on innovation, and on tourism. I was also at a meeting at the DOT with Ms. Stockton and Mr. DeShield about Nassau Street. We discussed this idea about whether it might be beneficial for the town to take over jurisdiction of Nassau Street, whether that will help with some of the approvals. What we heard was not very promising for that because we would be taking over all financial responsibility for the street as well. And so we're still exploring whether there's a way for us to help streamline some of the approval issues and permitting issues we're having without being the complete bank account for Nassau Street. And we also talked with them about the traffic light requests that we've had in to put in all pedestrian cross signals. And there will be a resolution coming to council probably at our next meeting, right, October 8th, that says that council is willing to pay for 25% of those projects, which is required by DOT for them to move forward. But they still seemed open to that idea, so I thought that part of the meeting was more promising. And Deanna, when it comes, you can add whatever you want to that report. I've been working with 2 groups of Princeton University students. They're part of this group that used to be called Princeton Business Volunteers, and now they're called Princeton University Nonprofit Consultants. And they're like 19 going on 49, pretty much. So there's one group that's going to be taking a look at the town's website and social media accounts and doing an analysis and making recommendations. I thought it was a good time actually for them, for somebody to really take a comprehensive look at the new website from a, outside objective perspective. And then there's another group that's going to be looking at what options there might be for townwide high-speed Wi-Fi service and what things are out there, and doing a report on that. And that same group is also going to be looking at what they can do to improve communications on campus about what's going on in the larger community. So maybe at some point they'll come in and give a report to council. They're really great kids, so it's fun to work with them. Welcoming week was last week, and I just want to thank everybody who helped to plan that. It was really wonderful. There was a naturalization ceremony at the library. I don't see Brett here tonight. Usually he's here, but it was, it's just a great partnership we have with the library, and it was a really nice event. And then finally, I was at 2 conferences that were on campus this past week. One was on food waste, and it was put on by Sustainable Princeton and the DEP and a lot of the local restaurants. So it's exciting to see them interested in this subject and working together. There was a lot of excitement about the Bloomberg project we've been working on. And then on Friday, there was a conference on accelerating climate action. And I was able to participate in a panel about local climate action, and there were some really phenomenal speakers there. I think most of the members of the PEC were in attendance, and so hopefully we'll be taking some of the ideas that we learned there and seeing if we can apply them here in Princeton. Are there any staff reports yet? Ms. Stockton?
One clarification to start, the Public Information Center is actually being held from 6 to 8 p.m. tomorrow night, and that's for the 206 culvert replacement project. Another reminder is that as of October 1st, you will no longer be able to recharge smart cards. This is part of the process of phasing those out in the parking system. I also see that the Recreation Department has shut down the spray ground at Mary Moss Playground as of yesterday. And then 2 more updates. The resurfacing project is underway for the Engineering Department. Started work last week on Great Road. There's 1 more section on Great Road and Elm Road to be resurfaced, and then they will be moving over to Mountain, Moore, and Witherspoon Street. And that should be wrapped up, I think, probably mid-October for that work. Cherry Valley Road bids will be accepted and opened on Thursday this week, and if everything looks to be in order, we would be working with Montgomery for their council to approve the award of a contract simultaneous to Princeton's issuing of or conducting that award of the contract at the October 8th meeting.
Mr. Miller?
I'm glad Chief Sutter is here because maybe he can answer this. do we have data? I think we did collect data on Mercer Street, but did we ever decide that narrowing the lanes actually slowed down the traffic? And if so, are we doing that with all new roads just with the striping?
Yeah, I'm deferring.
I mean, because I know we've been collecting traffic data.
Mercer was not a good example from what I understand from the Traffic Safety Bureau, because we do have such wide shoulders in large areas on that roadway. Even though we narrowed the lanes to 11 feet, with the wide shoulder, there was still the perception that you had space. So I do know on that roadway that's the case. I would have to check, because Hamilton and Valley were the other two roadways that we have since installed narrower lanes, and Walnut now as well. So I'll double check with Traffic Safety Bureau, and we can bring that back in another report to a council meeting.
Okay, great. Any other staff reports? No, okay. Then we'll move on to the main feature for tonight's meeting, which is the work session on parking. And I'd like to invite up Julie Dixon and Scott
It's on the,
Sillers.
desktop. I may have loaded it up already. It may be already loaded up.
Okay. I think so. So just by way of background, we've been discussing many pieces of the new parking system. Tonight, the focus is going to be on the finance part of it, so what the new meter rates will be, and then also I'm hoping we can have a conversation about what our options are with the smart card balances that are left over in April.
Good evening.
Yeah, and sorry, it's a small town, so probably everybody knows who Scott Sillers is, but just in case, Scott's the chair of our Citizens Finance Advisory Committee. We asked to take a look at the costs of the new parking system and making sure that we're setting meter rates that are not going to put us in the hole. So that we can be financially responsible as part of this. So I want to thank Scott in particular, and also all of CFAC for their analysis.
Well, let's hope you're still thanking me at the end of the evening. Good evening. We basically, the CFAC, as Mayor Lempert said, we were asked to look at the parking system and the proposed and the analyses that have been done, and review those and come up with what the meter rates would need to be in order to cover our costs. We reviewed the current parking system, the revenue and cost models that Dixon Resources put together, and also the cost estimates for the new system. We did not, independently verify the numbers behind it, the quotes that the purchasing costs for those systems. And we also reviewed the assumptions used in the revenue and cost models. Now, just to set the financial stage, the meter rates were last changed in, I think it was 2007 for fiscal year 2008. And since then, the municipal cost index, which is kind of the common cost multiplier that is used by municipalities, just like CPI is for consumers, the municipal cost index is what municipalities use as a gauge of what costs have done over time. That's gone up 27.4% since 2007. Just going back to 2013, the start of the first year of consolidation, parking meters have stayed almost flat at $1.8, $1.9 million. The parking utility surplus that's transferred to the current fund every year has remained flat at $1.4 million. And just as a reminder, the current fund is where we pay for, construction and maintenance of roads, where we pay for public safety, where we pay, public works, all these things that benefit all citizens and all parkers and all businesses alike. In the meantime, at the same time, our property taxes have gone up 13, 14%, and that's because that's the only thing that we have that can increase over time. Everything else is basically flat, as demonstrated by the parking utility transfer. So the taxpayer is paying for everything, all the increases in government expenses over the years. Now, looking at the parking project, the costs that are going to be incurred, it's estimated that the upfront capital costs are going to be $1 million. And then ongoing year in, year out, there's going to be increases of $695,000 per year to our costs. Those are made up of annual operating costs increasing $79,000, equipment servicing fees for the new equipment, $66,000. Fees, credit card fees, including fees to our banks, going up $38,000. Fees to the cardholders bank, going up an estimated $188,000. Additional staffing for parking enforcement. We're assuming that we're going to add one enforcement officer. Amortization of that $1 million of capital costs, it's going to go into our financial statements over the next 5 years at $200,000 a year. And then lastly, we anticipate that as a result of the added enforcement and particularly the greater convenience of being able to pay by credit card or by app, that we're going to lose some parking ticket revenue, which right now goes into the current fund, about $62,000. So there's almost $700,000 worth of added costs over the next 5 years. As I showed you on the previous slide, the current meter revenues are $1,898,000. So you add $695,000 to that, and you get $2.6 million. If we increase the contribution to the current fund by 20%, that would be $280,000 a year. So if we wanted to recoup all our costs and also get us back to where we were a number of years ago as far as how much the parking system was paying, contributing to the current fund, it'd be $2,873,000 a year. So that's the cost side. We then took it and utilized the Dixon Resources revenue model, which I think you guys have seen, and all I wanted to do here was just remind you what it looked like and what went into it. It's got a number of inputs. Basically, if we just walk right down, if you look at Zone 3 remote and just walk down that column there, you've got the rate per hour, the number of spaces, the total hours that the spaces are operative, total number of days per year that the spaces are operative, an assumption about what the occupancy rates for those spaces are going to be and what the compliance rates for people parking in those spaces are going to be. And it will then spit out a number. In this case, under those assumptions, for Zone 3, it's we really have to look at the first number there, $487,000 for that zone in 1 year. So that's the revenue model. Just now stepping back for a second and looking where we are with current meter rates, we've got the ranges of the rates. We've got, as you know, a smorgasbord of different parking rates out there, ranging from for $1 to $1.25 in the central business district. In the perimeter zones, you've got rates of 30 cents, $1 for the first 2 hours, and then 60 cents for thereafter. Some of them 75 cents for the first 2 hours, and 40 cents thereafter, and then $1, 75 cents, and $1.25. That averages 85 cents if you go through all of them. And then Zone 3, they're 30 cents all the way up to $1 an hour. And the 30-meter rates are $1.25. They're all at $1.25 now. So there are the number of spaces for each of the zones. These are loose associations because the zones just, the planned zones roughly parallel where the existing rate structures are high and low, but they don't exactly equal it. And you kind of see a graph at the bottom of the page, of the slide there, where the dispersion of the rates. Now, going to proposed meter rates, in order to cover the $2.8 million, we're getting close at $2,772,000 under this set of assumptions. Proposed moving the central business district rates to $2.25 across all meters. The perimeter meters would go to $1.50 with a time limit of 3 hours in that zone, and in the remote zone, 75 cents, where there's no limitation on the number of hours, just a day limitation. Up there, I've got the ranges of the percent increase according to whether you're looking at the high rate, the average rate, or the low rate. So you can see in zone 2, some of the rates are going to go up 20%, some of them are going to go up by a factor of 4. And that's the 30-cent rate basically going up to a factor of 4, going up to $1.50. In zone 3, you've got rates, in some cases they're declining slightly, and in other cases they're going up by 150%. So this structure basically gets us close as we can get to break even, including the $280,000 contribution to the current fund. And we'll come back to this slide at the end of the presentation. So we just walk through the rest of the presentation, and then we can post all the questions. The key projection assumptions are the occupancy and compliance rates, number one. And I've got the model here, how the model works here. It's meter rate times hours of operation times percent occupancy times percent compliance. We assumed in the model it's basically just 50%. Dixon at one point quoted a rule of thumb to me of 65% occupancy and 80% compliance is kind of like the standard industry rule of thumb. Those two multiplied together is 52%. 1% swing on an average, if you just average it across all meter zones, in the occupancy times percentage rate is $55,000. So if you have if you go from 50 to 52%, if that turns out to be correct, then we're going to make $110,000 more probably on average. There was one analysis that was presented was a 2017 parking meter analysis, and it indicated a rate of 55%, but there's a lot of suspicion in those numbers, I must say. It didn't have the footprint of our current parking area because Alexander Street was still all torn up. It didn't total to what you would expect it to total to if it really represented our revenues. It didn't come up with $1.8 million worth of revenues.
It was more or less?
It was less. And the hours of operation that are present now are different than what we're going to have in the future. In particular, in most places there's no Saturday hours. So, and the weekday hours are longer. So as you shift into the new model, there's a lot of room for things to be less than occupancy to be less. If you think that people are not going to park so frequently in the remote areas, for example, on weekends because there's more availability elsewhere or less demand, then occupancy could go down out there. So that's one assumption. The other key assumption is on credit card costs. And credit card fees, they reduce our revenue by both the gateway fees, which are fees to our banks, and merchant processing fees, which are fees to the cardholders' banks. They have a fixed component and a percent component, and the fixed component results in card fees at small dollar values being eating up the revenues very quickly. And you can see the outlay here. At 50 cents payment, they range from 36%. They take 36% of the 50 cents up to 62% of the 50 cents. And the model that I used, it had an assumption that we'd have 40% cash, 30% usage for credit card, and 30% usage for the app. Dixon pointed out earlier today that it's probably going to be more like 50%, I think, for credit card, and 10%? 10% for mobile and 40% for cash. That doesn't affect it that much. It may actually lower our costs a little bit, but if it turns out to be a lot more credit card usage, then we can quickly incur a lot more fees, but up to, in this example, $110,000 more. It also assumed that people were going to pay for 2, 3, and 6 hour stays in zones 1, 2, and 3. Even though, they're not obligated to pay for that amount. It depends on what we set minimum values are for each spot. And that could swing our fees up quickly. I think that there's some cushion in the model, that's not going to be as severe as one would dream, but it does tell us that we should consider putting minimum transaction amounts on for credit card usage.
Can I ask a question about that? So if I'm parked at a 2-hour meter and I put in money for an hour on my credit card, and then I come back because it's about to run out and I put in another half hour, then I get charged 2 sets of fees, right?
Well, so it's just like when you use your personal credit card today at, the Quickie Mart. When you're sliding your credit card, this is the same exact type of situation. When you actually see vendors and stores that put up minimums to say that you can't use your credit card unless you spend a minimum of $1 or $2. And that's exactly what Scott is referring to, is the fact that we would likely establish a threshold to be able to use your credit card at the meter for $1 minimum is what we're anticipating that number to be. And it's really just to, again, try to lessen that effect of what those percentages are for the fees that the municipality actually has to pay. And that's part of what establishing what that threshold is. And likely $1 is pretty much consistent across the industry of what most agencies require. And the message would be on the screen of the parking meter that would say $1 minimum for use of credit cards, so that people clearly understand the fact that they would be committing to that minimum investment.
Right. And then is it cheaper to use the app versus the credit card in terms of the fees, or is it about the same?
It's relatively the same in terms of the way that the numbers basically play out. But a couple of comments, that this isn't part of the analysis. There are several studies that show the uptick on parking meter revenue just by the use of the implementation of credit card. And I also just have to reinforce what Scott was saying. What you're seeing here today is very conservative, and we probably are being a bit, we're definitely overestimating some of the costs, because we want to make sure that we're safeguarding the municipality in the estimation. The fact is that, like he said, that most people are going to be paying for longer stays just because of the convenience of using the card. We're just trying to be very conservative so that way, if some anomaly happens here, we want to make sure that we're forecasting appropriately.
So that we didn't put the Dinky parking lot in, but we did talk about it. So do you want to talk about the Dinky parking lot, since that was a subject earlier today?
Did you want to talk about Dinky?
I think we were keeping the rates the same there, right?
Yeah. Yeah, $4 at the Dinky lot was in terms of what we discussed the other day was basically not touching it, and we're going to create its own zone. so that that way the programming of the meter rates are specific to the dinky lot. And
Right.
then we can obviously talk about the pay stations on the street and making sure that we're safeguarding, because there's also limitations for the on-street parking because we don't allow for the overnight parking on-street. So we're talking about creating a separate zone just for the dinky lot. That way it allows for the flexibility and the use of those parking spaces.
Right, and we're also making it simpler. There's some weirdness right now for people who use the lot. Like, it's something like, it's cheaper if you do it for 24 hours. Anyway, so we're making it all rational.
The one other change that we did talk about was extending the limit. So I guess it's 3 days now. We were talking
Right,
about maybe making it 7 days, not changing the rate, but the question I had about the credit card fees is, instead of having a minimum transaction, is it possible, like they do at gas stations, to charge a higher rate if somebody's using credit card?
So we cannot do that. That was actually challenged by the credit card companies themselves. You cannot penalize a patron and treating credit card any different than cash. So you actually are.
Gas stations throughout New
can't speak
Jersey
for the
have
gas
advertised prices that are different.
Yeah, I can't speak for the gas stations. I can just tell you that this was specifically challenged in San Francisco because there was a point that there was a fee being charged to the consumer to be able to swipe their card. And that was definitely challenged legally, and they were told that
Well,
they
I
weren't
wonder
allowed
if it's a
to.
matter of state law. I mean,
We can look at that, though, and
I
check
would
it.
look into that.
Yeah, we can
'cause
definitely
I
investigate
think
it.
that'd be preferable, because
I-
say you don't have any change.
I think
and
it's
you-
actually contractual.
Pardon?
Right, it's the
Contractual.
credit card companies, not the
Yeah.
state law.
Yeah, I think it's the
No,
credit
but
card.
what the credit card companies are allowed to require of their vendors would be governed by state law.
I'll come back and go back and pull the verbiage that we saw in California, but I'm pretty sure that it is dictated by the credit card company, but we can definitely go back and look at that for sure.
Anyway,
But in the event, David.
the reason why it's preferable is
The
that,
municipality does it with property taxes, and the state does it with speeding tickets and parking tickets.
does what?
Charges a
Charges
fee.
more, convenience fee.
Yeah, so,
We can look at it for sure.
yeah.
Maybe we could charge a convenience fee.
Yeah. And I think it's important, I just want to make it, it's an important point, because if you have no change and you're only parking for, well, I guess you would pay for the more time than you needed if you had a minimum transaction. But the point is, let's give the people the convenience, but make them pay for it, rather than saying you cannot park here if you don't spend.
Well, we're not saying you can't park here, you just
Right.
have to put in at least $1.
Right, okay.
I think, in truth, for most of the meters, it's going to cost you at least $1 to get any significant amount of time with the
Yeah.
rates.
Let's,
new rates, but yeah.
let me get to through
Sure.
the end of the presentation, and we're close to the end, and then, because there's one spot where we can focus in on that. The last slide, basically, the second last slide is just comparison of rates in area, surrounding area, and it looks like generally we're in the ballpark. I would say, just in my little back of the envelope studying of it, is that the rates underlie a strategy that goes along with them. So it's very difficult just to look at rates in a vacuum. There's in a town may have low rates because they're trying to do certain things, or high rates because they're trying to drive parking in a certain direction. And our rate structure should be doing the same thing. And then just, we've got the same chart you saw before, but the proposed rates, what the break even is, how close we are, 4% difference. That's right, spot on as far as this forecasting goes. And where the garage parking rates are, just for comparison purposes. And then Dixon brought up an excellent point this morning or this afternoon after this was put to bed, and that's that with the 30-minute meter rates, it's tough to have $1.25 an hour and divide that by 2. It's like impossible. So the recommendation is we just take that and make those spots 65 cents for a half hour. I mean, is that right?
Yeah.
I said it. No, a dollar, what am I, $1.15, $1.30. $1.15, make it $2.30 for an hour. Or you can make it higher. It's not a lot of money either way.
You ready for questions?
Yeah.
So, Scott, thanks. It seems like your premise is trying to, you said, get the closest to break even, right? And that's what's fueling these simulations. But should we be doing more than breaking even in the sense that if it's been 10 years since we last updated rates?
When I say break even, you know, I'm adding $280,000 additional monies to the current fund.
But it still seems conservative to me, given that we haven't raised rates in a long time, and then I can imagine, I won't be up here, but I can imagine we won't again for another 10 years, and so I'm just wondering if, what? Okay, do we have an answer to that?
Yes, please. So just something that we've talked about several times in this last few months is that's the actual key, just like what you were sharing with just the overall increases on other factors. You should be looking at this on your normal fee schedule every year and looking at incremental raises. This could potentially be a big jump, but it's also because you haven't done a jump in, you know, almost 10 years. And so this is kind of a catch-up mode, but then the opportunity to then re-look at your numbers every year so that you're doing small increases so that it doesn't have this big of an impact on your community. This is the one place to kind of get you caught up. And then it's intended that you'll look at this every year, just like we should be looking at all of your fee schedules. This would be one of the things that we should definitely, especially for the dynamic mode of what you all are doing just as a Park Princeton, Go Princeton model. We want to make sure that this stays, you know, on the docket and it's not something that we ignore. We want to make sure that we stay fresh. And also the opportunity to look at what this rate model does, especially after this first year. There might be opportunities where you could make slight increases, but you could also see slight decreases, because once we see what the true operating costs are and what the true expenses are, the opportunity to have a dynamic model where there could be places where you could do bump ups, but there also could be places where you're bumping down. But getting to a point where you're really only doing 25-cent or 50-cent incremental increases or decreases, that would be the ideal for Princeton in terms of where you guys should be in the future.
Yeah.
Mr. Cohen?
Just to tag on to that, I would expect there would be places where we would be dropping down a little, because if people aren't parking where we want them to, we may need to lower rates to sort of redirect them. I did want to go back close to the beginning of the presentation, Scott. I picked up on the difference between the revenue projections using current rates. I think it's page 5. Actually, I need to put my glasses on, but the revenue projections using current rates was something like 1,700,000.
1,730,000.
Yeah, and yet the actual revenue using current rates is the 1.89, and I'm curious if you have a theory for why the discrepancy. I mean, is it being off on the occupancy rates?
Yeah, this assumes 50%, number one.
Mm-hmm.
And
So,
it
but
could be
that's a
little
good
bit
way
higher.
to sort of check. I mean, if you were to adjust the occupancy rates or the compliance rates or whatever to get up to that actual number, then that might tell you something about what kinds of occupancy
Or
rates
it
we
might
should
tell me
expect.
something else. I'm ignoring the Wawa spaces in here, so I've cut off a little bit of the revenue already. You've got occupancy, you've got also different configurations. The 1,898,000, whatever it is, it's got the Trinity lot in it, for example, and that's no longer going to be around. And it's got spaces that are intermingled between the zones. You know,
Mhm.
In other words, you know, there's 30-cent spaces in the zone 2, and so you just can't quite get to the right number. You don't know where the occupancy is going to be going forward. If you look at that 2017 study, in one area, the occupancy was 60%. In another, it was 52%, I think. But the footprint of those zones are precisely what they're going to be going forward. So you're kind of loath to put too much science behind these numbers.
And this provides you more of an apples to apples comparison so that when you're looking at current versus forecasted, I think it's really fair that it was trying to level the playing field for those comparisons. So because there are some exceptional situations, this will also give us a good measure moving forward so that when we look back and try to make those comparisons and look backwards, we'll be able to have this as kind of a, a baseline too.
Yeah. I guess just as a final comment on this, it maybe gives the rest of council a little bit of a comfort level because, using the revenue model, it predicts bringing in less than we are actually bringing in. So, in 2017, so hopefully that will be the case in the future as well, that the predicted revenue will actually be a little bit less than the actual revenue.
Well, I just wanted to tell people who are paying attention, who are parking nerds who are here, or who are watching, that we did have discussions about other options to do dynamic pricing, for instance, what you were talking about, and also doing a system where you pay more the longer you stay rather than having time limits. And we also looked at having certain times of the day be more expensive, and we weighed the pros and cons at another meeting. And we came up with, and we decided on a more kind of vanilla system like this for now. And part of it is the technology that's more expensive for some of the other ways to do it.
Any comments or questions from down there?
Actually, hopefully it's related, but I was wondering whether any other municipalities are able to capture whether they have different rates for tourist buses, if they take up more space?
Sure. So we've actually been looking at the bus situation here in Princeton too, to try to come up with some alternatives, and also trying to identify where we want the buses to park. And typically, when a vehicle takes up more than one space, hopefully it's off of the primary grid, you charge them for those. But what we typically try to do is put them into a location where it's typically off-street so that it's more conducive to the location. There are several jurisdictions that get the buses to park remotely, and it's actually free, but it's because it gets them out of the core congestion area. We didn't account for anything like buses in this particular model. Because right now the buses, we're really trying to get them to move off of Nassau into other locations. So I think it's part of a separate project, but ideally vehicles that are parked are intended to pay for the parking spaces that they occupy. But I will say that we are definitely trying to discourage those types of vehicles from being in your CBD and in your primary zones too, because we want to really keep those available for passenger, visitors, that type of transition. So
right now, if they're just loading or unloading, they don't pay.
The term active loading is the key, and when we bring the municipal ordinances to you all for review, it's actually something, the loading zones in particular are a big part of that, not just for bus loading and unloading, but also passenger loading, commercial loading, and there's a whole component of that which I believe you're going to hear at the next council meeting too.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you for the excellent report. This is a lot of details here. How often will we be monitoring the various zones, like zone 1, 2, and 3? Is that something that we monitor monthly, quarterly?
Sure. It's actually something at least at a monthly basis, but it's something too that as we implement the project, the system actually has dashboards on it too. And that's one of the nice benefits of having the one vendor solution for the parking meter technology, is that your parking team will have the ability to go into the system and actually be able to run reports and also see real-time data. It ties in with everything from the parking payments to the collections to the reconciliation process. And so that's something too that during the training process, I have to tell you, there will be several city staff from different departments that will be involved in the training process that will have access to that, and then being able to report on it at least monthly internally. And then I would anticipate being able to come back potentially and do quarterly reports to council, because I would hope that we're going to do, this has been a big investment of everybody's time and effort, so being able to report out to all of you guys to keep you posted of all of that as well. Without a doubt, I think that's going to be something that will hopefully be pretty simple to do too, because the system actually has some self-reporting modules as well.
We're very happy to have parking discussed at all of our meetings going forward. I think I speak for
Who's the we?
Councilwoman
Yes.
Howard.
Who's the we?
I think that this is one of the reasons why this is her last term on council. I wanted to acknowledge, first of all, the extraordinary work that Scott and CFAC have done here. We're so fortunate in, and we almost sort of take it for granted that we're able to give them sort of complex data points in stuff that isn't exactly, that's fluctuating, and they're able to give us reports, and then it's up to us to take the steps. And this is, frankly, it's going to be sticker shock for a lot of people. And I was happy that at the last meeting, the mayor went back and looked at what were our goals for this project. And I think that these rates help us to achieve the goals that began 2-3 years ago when we decided to go down this road. So I know that there's ordinances and public hearings, and that I'm sure we'll hear from the public. There'll be robust discussion about this, but it makes sense to me that if we haven't raised rates since 2007, that we're going to have to raise them significantly this time, and then we'll be able to have data, more rich data on hand to make future decisions. So once again, thank you, Scott.
Thank you. I'd like to open it up if there's anybody who's been listening who'd like to make a comment. Welcome you up.
Hi, Eve Niedergang, 15 Forester Drive. Scott, I have a question on the visual that's of the slide that's up there now about the garage, and then a follow-up, a different question. I thought the idea was that the garage would encourage long-term parking, whereas it looks, and maybe I misunderstood something, definitely the cost is going up the longer you park there, whereas I thought the idea was to get people off the street and into the garage for the long-term parking. So that's one issue I'd like clarified. And then I think one of the features that people really liked about the smart cards was, you park you put in an hour and you come back 55 minutes later and you get your 5 cents back. Is that feature going to be in the app? I know it won't be on the credit card, but would that be a feature of the app? So anyway, thank you.
Okay, why don't we get all the comments and we'll sort of write down the questions, and then we'll go back and revisit.
Okay, first of all, congratulations. I think sounds like a great plan, but I just want to point out my personal point of view when I look for that scarce parking spot. When I pull down Palmer Square, half an hour meter, I don't care if it's 65 cents or 75 cents. I'm overjoyed to find a spot. I'll pay $1. I don't care. And I know the merchants will say, it lessens their competitiveness to drive out to Market Fair or wherever to get a free spot. That's 6 miles. That's $4 right there. So we have an amazing place for, thank you for all the work you've done. And paying parking is sort of one of the costs of taking my big vehicle that emits pollution, that takes up space, and uses it. So I feel like I'm getting value when I'm paying for parking. And so as a fellow landlord, you don't raise the rent all at once every 10 years. You move it up a little bit every year or so. So many more parking discussions every year, hopefully. Thank you.
I'll hope you come back for those. Anybody else would like to speak?
Hi, Tina Catillos, 75 Dempsey Avenue. Thank you for a great presentation and all the work. My question is about the relative rates to the commercial parking garage. I mean, I know that you have the municipality has control over the rates in the municipal garage. I don't know how much control you have over the commercial parking garage, but my understanding is that at least one of them was built many years ago, before my time, to alleviate the parking congestion in Palmer Square. And so the parking rate in that garage is $3.50 per hour for the first hour. And then it follows some weird algorithm, which I don't understand, but it goes down to $2 per hour. So I don't understand, yeah, I'm just a simple geek. I don't understand accounting or psychology, but I do understand myself. And I know that for $3.50, I'm not going to park in that garage, which is why its occupancy is only at most 35%, as we've seen from the parking study. If you want me to park in that garage and not stand on Palmer Square all day, for me, it needs to be cheaper to park in the garage than on Palmer Square. So I'm just putting this out there. You're the experts. You'll figure this out.
Thank you. I think it's a good point nonetheless if we, just to remind people that there's more expensive parking downtown too. Okay, so is there anybody else who'd like to speak? All right, so if not, let's go back through the questions. So the first question was the garage. It looked like it was costing more per hour the longer you stayed, and whether there was unintended incentive there. But I mean, I don't know if anybody here dates back to when those rates were set up, or whether it's something where we'd want to open that can of, open that up and take a look at it and reverse it.
It's a good question.
So the important part right now is the garage. It's actually still more affordable, so that you think about the free option, first of all. And then when you think about it, where the garage is located in Zone 1, basically the $1.25 an hour rate compared to the $2.25 an hour rate on street, that's where you actually see that cost savings. And so for the long term, really the ideal, and also for permit parking and other things like that, it is still more affordable for you to park in the garage. Now, do I think we're going to have to evaluate the garage eventually? Yes, but right now we're saying that the rates are solid, especially for what's being proposed here. But it's definitely something that I think the garage rates will need to be on the table. But right now, we're not suggesting that we tamper with the garage rates or make any recommendations. And just to tackle what the person mentioned about the private garage rates, fortunately or unfortunately, we can't dictate what the private garage can charge, but market rates usually establish utilization, and our hope is that we can influence behaviors that the private operators will partake and potentially adjust their rates accordingly. And that's something that we see across the country, when special events happen, private garages, put out, incredible rates, things like that. And again, that's what, just the market demand really plays into. It's something that we have collaborated with the private operators in terms of trying to bring them along and participate in the program. And so I do think that based on adoption of just the overall Park Princeton model, that this is something that we can continue to carry that message along when it comes to the rate structures. But I do hope that in the next 6 months to a year, we're sitting back here having a discussion on the garage rates, because our hope is that we're really going to be able to influence behavior and see what we need to start to do in terms of modeling, so that part of that dynamic discussion is when we're talking about not only the parking meter rates and what they should be, but also the garage rates, because we're talking about a fluid demand model where, again, rates could go up, rates could go down, whether the increase or decrease of even the free parking allocation, Those are all parts of this process as we influence behavior.
I guess the fundamental question, though, is if we, I know we're not looking at the garage rates right now, but if we were to look at the garage rates, would you support this sort of scaling model, or would it go the other direction? Would you have the fourth hour be cheaper than the first 3 hours?
So that's, for your garage in particular, this, for what the councilwoman brought up about a demand rate model, for you all, this would probably be the one place where I would suggest you having a demand rate model based on the lunch hour, for example, for people that are parking when you have your most peak demand. Your garage, because it's gated, you have the infrastructure to allow you to implement rate structures that control usage. But in our case today, we want to encourage people to go and park in the garage and use the garage, and that's why we're saying keeping the rates lower than on-street is ideal. And so as we start to see the behavior being changed and seeing if the cars start to move to the more remote or perimeter locations and see what the effects of the garage are, that's when we really truly have to look at the rates, and you may want to start to consider things like when the garage is at its highest peak and highest demand. But because we now will have data, as the councilman mentioned, this is going to be the real critical factor, is that we're going to be able to have data based on the paid parking models tied in with on-street and off-street, so that we can make those forecasts and recommendations based on utilization.
Can I follow up on that?
Yeah.
There is no situation where this model actually makes sense, though.
For the garage?
Or is there? I mean, that it gets more expensive. I mean, right now, it seems like we're doing the wrong thing.
Jenny, I go the other way. I think it works perfectly, because it, if you want to stay long-term, it slowly pushes you, tells you that you should be parking in the perimeter or remote, because that's less expensive. If you have a quick trip to make downtown, but you're sensitive to the $2.25, well, you can park for a little bit less in the garage for a shorter period of time.
And turn the space over, get your business done, and turn the space over so that somebody else can park there for a more affordable rate.
Okay, so you would recommend this right now?
Yes, absolutely. I think that this is consistent with what our goals for Princeton. I think that this is really ideal for where we should start.
Okay.
I want to sort of move it along. I know, because we're going to revisit this, because we're not dealing with, I just don't want to have all the headlines be about the garage parking when we're, this is for a future decision. All right, and then I think I know the answer to this one, but there's a question about the smart card, and one of the things people like about the smart card is that when you come back to your meter, it gives you back the extra money. My understanding is that the app allows us to do that if we wanted to, but that's a council decision. Is that?
Yep, it's a business rule that you all can decide on, but the fact that a person could start a session and end a session, that's all within your purview. So it's a business operating rule. The one hitch that I would say is really that whole credit card fees for minimums, things like that we could start to talk about when we get into the weeds of the project. But overall, it's a business rule.
But Julie, is there an extra credit card fee if people are getting money back?
So we'll have to go back and look at that, but I don't believe that there is, because I do believe that the way that the Passport app works is that your money is held in escrow until the session is ended in that particular case. So you're only charged the fees for the transaction amount that's utilized, so.
Well, I think I'd want to know if it were cheaper to use the app than a credit card, and that would be a way to incentivize people to use the app. If the app is the same as the credit card, then I feel like why are we pushing people to use the app, really?
Right, it's just a matter of convenience. When you talked about weather or other factors of people that don't want to get out of the cars, but especially at the locations where you're going to have pay stations, that's one of the factors, especially for your long-term parkers who are usually repeat parkers. Those are the folks that are really going to rely on the app. Truly, where the locations that you have the single-space parking meters, with the credit card option, most people are still just going to slide their cards at those locations. The places where I would anticipate you're going to have higher mobile utilization will be in the locations where you have your longer term parking, pay stations, or at the dinky lot, because the dinky lot is perfect for commuters who are running to catch the train and can just, start a session. Those are ideal for those types of spots.
Right, okay. Any other thoughts on this? Mr.
Just,
Ryan?
is this the time that we need to offer guidance on the grace period? I think that Scott's model, an hour is an hour, right? And the reality for us now is that an hour is actually an hour and 10 minutes. And how does that work in the ordinance? Do the ordinances now incorporate the grace period, or is that just something that we do and expect people to cotton on?
I thought Trishka answered this at the last meeting, which is that it does not have to be ordinanced. That's more of a administrative, operating. Right. I do want to come back to, I know there's been some discussion of this, and I just wanted to make this public because I think it's important to reiterate that my understanding, at least, and one of the goals of this is that when you set up a system that's easier and more convenient to use, that we should see higher compliance. And at the end of the day, that's what we're hoping for, is more compliance and fewer tickets.
Correct. And today we met with the police department to work on a new strategic schedule to make sure that we have a good dispersion of compliance officers, so that we would have coverage on the weekends, into the evenings. All of your posted hours would basically have parking enforcement personnel out there. And again, we're really trying to focus this on being a positive customer service experience. But the fact is that we want to make sure people also understand that the rules apply during the posted hours. So there's no, get out of jail free cards and you can't park for free on Sundays, those factors too. That's why you all put so much thought and consideration into the hours of operation. So working with the police department to be sure that the staffing covers the hours that are posted.
Right, thank you. And I just want to make sure that that we sort of go on record right now that council's comfortable with these new proposed rates?
Yes.
Okay.
Mayor, would you like me to just talk about smart cards really quick?
Yes, and let's talk about smart cards.
Sure. So we have gone back to the drawing board, and I really appreciate the public comment. So thank you for on the smart cards. So as everyone is aware, the smart card utilization, you will stop being able to purchase new smart cards or to be able to add to your smart cards at the end of this month. The utilization of the smart cards will be effective basically in the garage as of November 5th. The utilization for that program has been extended till the end of April. And what we've decided to do is that we're going to basically, in January, look at what that utilization is. We know what the current dollar amount is that's basically out there. I call it the float that's out there today. We're going to look in January at what that number is. And then the plan is, depending upon what the usage has been and how much reserve there is, our intention is on March 1st. That we would basically either come to you and request an extension if we just have a small residual or a large residual for usage in the garage, or we would come up with a comprehensive buyback program that would basically allow for credit to the mobile plan. I want to highlight that this would be a very manual, cumbersome, laborious process. And so we're trying to really encourage users to use their smart cards in the garage after November 5th in order to just deplete that number. And then our plan is that on March 1, depending upon where we are in January, and we can report out to you all on that, in March we would come up with some type of transition program or something like that, understanding that there is still dollar value associated with that. We just want to be mindful of the clerk's office and understanding the role that would be involved in that process, and we want to try to mitigate that as much as we possibly can, but we will give adequate, ample notice to make sure that users are very clear on what the next steps in the process will be, but we really want to encourage people, use your smart cards in the garage.
Great.
Thank you.
If there's one more thing, I just want to make sure that we keep in mind in terms of schedule, next steps in the process. At the next meeting, we will be bringing forth the ordinance for the rates and also all of the changes to the meter ordinances. And that would mean there would be a public hearing at the second meeting in October. And we would need to have all of that passed so that we could have the meters implemented November 5th. So it's a very tight schedule.
Okay.
I just want to remind you that the schedule has on it the 30-minute meters at $2.25 an hour, and that we're going to establish that at $2.30 an hour, $1.15 for them. And that there's also the minimum swipe amounts on $1. I don't know whether that's supposed to apply to the 30-minute meter or not.
We'll come back on that. So are you coming back to our next meeting when we do the ordinances? So I will physically not be here, but my colleague Allison will be for that particular meeting. Another council has reserved me about 6 months ago. You all have the meetings on the same nights, by the way. Allison will be here for sure, so to be able to address any questions. And one last parking update. Throughout the month of October, you're going to start seeing some construction. You'll start to see infrastructure being installed, pads being poured, pay stations being installed, and we have a whole transition process. We actually met with Public Works today. There's a lot of balls in the air, a lot of things happening, but you will likely see some progress being made just in the next couple of weeks. I just want to make sure you all knew that we're not getting ahead of ourselves. We're just preparing for whatever the decisions may be. We have technology coming to the municipality. So.
And when can people find the app in the App Store?
So the app, I'll have to verify that, but I believe they'll be able to start loading it by November 1st. But we'll reconfirm that when we come back for our next council meeting. But they should be able to start seeing it. We have a couple of different design things that are being fine-tuned in the background with some of the decals and signage, but they should be able to load it before. And there's a lot of social media, promotional, marketing materials, websites that are being developed, and we'll be ready for your purview probably about mid-October. So after we make some more decisions, I think then we'll be ready to start launching some stuff. So.
Okay, great.
Thank you very much.
And I just want to reiterate thank you to Scott again. It's you're like an honorary member of the staff practically, so we really appreciate it. Okay. And I want to thank also everybody here tonight too for being supportive and constructive. So it's just an honor to be in the room with all of you. I think this is a big community issue, and we all appreciate you coming here with positive spirit and good questions. All right, next we come to ordinance public hearing for tonight, which is 2018-20, an ordinance by the municipality of Princeton concerning cable franchise renewal and the Code of the Township of Princeton, New Jersey, 1968. And this ordinance was really just more of a house cleaning ordinance, but I'd like to open up the public hearing. If there's anybody who'd like to speak to this?
There is.
Oh, there is. Oh, come on up.
Hi, yes. Good evening, thank you. My name is Raymond DeVoe. I live at 422 Snowden Lane, Princeton, New Jersey. As of January of this year, I've been very proud to serve as the chairman of the board of directors of Princeton Community Television, where we've been bringing education and training services to the citizens of Princeton, along with several other valuable services for over 20 years at a zero tax dollar cost to those citizens. I guess you had said it was just a house cleaning of sorts ordinance. I'd really just appreciate a clarification in the point of procedure of how things are proceeding, because, Madam Mayor, as you know, Ms. Krummeler and Mr. Cohen, we're in ongoing negotiations for this topic, so I just be interested in, I'd appreciate a clarification.
Did you want to add? So this ordinance is the relationship between the town and
Comcast.
And the negotiations we're having with you is between the town and TV30, Princeton Community TV.
The issue with the ordinance was, the contract was actually, agreement was negotiated some time ago. It was passed by the council. The problem is, administratively, it should have went to the BPU first and then introduced by council. When we found that out, we had to reintroduce the ordinance. For some reason, it got caught up in the BPU for such a long time, it's just getting back to us. So it's really purely administrative in terms of just having to reintroduce it again.
Okay, well, I'm sure you probably remember Saturday Night Live, Emily Litella. Never mind. I'm looking forward to resuming our negotiations, I believe the 23rd. And did everybody I know, Madam Mayor, Ms. Krumler, and Mr. Cohen, we gave out a media kit, but I did have enough for everybody to get a media kit which has a interactive sampler of some of the content and some of the services that we provide. So
if you drop that off at the clerk's office, oh, you have them. Oh, great, perfect.
Okay, thank you so much.
Okay, thanks.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Okay. Oh, I need to close the public hearing first. Is there anybody else who'd like to speak as part of this public hearing? All right, seeing no one, I'm going to close the public hearing.
I'll make a motion.
Second.
It's been moved by Ms. Krummeller, seconded by Mr. Liverman. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Mr. Cohen?
Yes.
Ms. Howard?
Yes.
Mr. Liverman?
Yes.
Ms. Crum-Miller?
Yes.
Mr. Quinn?
Yes.
Ms. Fraga?
Yes.
And the ordinance passes unanimously. And next we come to the consent agenda, which contains items of a routine nature passed by a single vote. Are there any items anybody would like removed from the consent agenda?
Can we pull number 2 just for comment?
Yeah, no, thank you. I was going to say something about that too. So is there a motion to approve the consent agenda minus item 2?
So moved. Second.
Who moved it?
Who moved it?
Oh, moved by Mr. Liverman and seconded by Ms. Krummeller. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And now Resolution 18-327, resolution authorizing a professional services agreement with Kimberly M. Lacken Esquire to serve as municipal prosecutor for the remainder of 2018 in an amount not to exceed $17,500. And this,
Mayor, do you want me to explain? Or
yeah, I mean, this is essentially to replace Reed Gusiora.
That's right.
Who went on to.
Our municipal prosecutor has gone on to be mayor of Trenton, and so we were fortunate that Kim Lacken actually was filling in for him, and the legal committee had a process of reviewing. Mark put out an RFP. There were many applications, and we reviewed 3 candidates along with the chief of police and the court administrator, and she was very impressive. I think had a very thoughtful approach that I think is consistent with. We can assure our colleagues, we conveyed community concerns about the use of discretion and fairness and equality in the courtroom and treating people, whether they have an attorney or not, the same. And I think we felt very good about her choice. So this is just for the remainder of the year, Mark. So then she would have to be reappointed next year.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I just confirm? I would assume that some of what we had approved for Reed's salary for the year is not being paid to him since he didn't complete the year, and that would cover
Yep, it's
this,
the same, and it's the
amount.
same rate.
Okay.
Okay.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Second.
Been moved by Ms. Krummeller, seconded by Mr. Quinn. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Resolution passes unanimously. And is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
You do, you really do.